Open almost any psychology textbook in the world, you will find an entire section dedicated to a single anonymous figure known only as patient HM. For decades, he was the most studied subject in neuroscience, the primary evidence that human memory is not a single brain-wide function, but a collection of distinct localized systems. Behind that clinical label was a real man named as Henry Molaison. His contribution to science was the result of reckless experiment rather than a calculated laboratory victory. The chain of events began when Henry was 8 years old. While crossing a street, he was struck by a bicycle. He hit the pavement hard, tearing his scalp, injuring his brain. Shortly after, he began to suffer from mild seizure that gradually intensified into debilitating epilepsy. That random accident created a neurological condition that eventually forced a young man desperate for a normal life into a collision with unrestrained medical system. By age 27, Henry was taking heavy doses of medication, sometimes combining 4 different drugs 5 times a day. It did not work. That he has to abandon his life as a motor vendor. He became prisoner in his own life. His family consulted an eminent neurosurgeon named William Baker Scoville. At the time, leading physicians like Winder Penfield argued that removing the large section of the temporal lobe was too dangerous when the exact source of patient seizure could not be found. Scoville, however, was more than willing to proceed. Scoville had a history of medical adventurism. Years earlier, when his own wife was diagnosed with a mental illness, he personally performed destructive bilateral frontal lobotomies on her, rendering a highly intelligent woman permanently docile. Henry Molaison was placing his life in the hands of a surgeon who had already demonstrated a willingness to gamble with irreversible brain destruction just to see what might happen. In August 1953, Scoville drilled into Henry's skull, even though his equipment showed no visible abnormality or localized electrical discharges. He removed large portions of Henry's medial temporal lobe, including the hippocampus on both sides of the brain. Initially, the surgery appeared to be a medical success. The frequency and the severity of Henry's epileptic seizure dropped significantly. Henry woke up with a profound anterograde amnesia. He had completely lost the ability to create new memories for any event occurring after the operation. His daily life became a continuous loop. When his family moved to a new house a few blocks away, Henry could never find the address. He would read the same magazine over and over without finding the contents familiar, and he would forget having eaten a full meal just 13 minutes after finishing it. In his attempt to stop the epilepsy, Scoville had identified the exact anatomical seat of memory formation in the human brain by physically removing it. To study this catastrophic outcome, a researcher named Brenda Miller began a series of tests that officially transformed Henry into subject HM. Miller used a mirror tracing task. She asked Henry to trace a star while looking at his hand through a mirror. It is a difficult motor skill that requires the brain to adjust the reversed visual feedback. Over 3 days, the graph shows Henry's error rate plummeted, providing he learned a new physical skill. But on day 3, despite tracing the star perfectly, Henry had no memory of previous attempts. He believed he was trying the task for the very first time. This provided hard evidence that memory is split into distinct systems. Henry lost his declarative memory, conscious backs, but his procedural memory, physical skill remained intact. Because he could hold a brief conversation but forget it later, it also proved short-term and long-term memory are completely separate systems. HM's case changed the core definition of memory from vague brain-wide phenomena to a modular system with physical border. While researchers used his data to build a new model of the mind, Henry himself was left behind, unable to recall the breakthrough he made possible. For the rest of his life, while memory science moved forward, Henry remained trapped in a single moment. He described his experience as a every day is alone itself. Whatever enjoyment I have had, whatever sorrow I have had. Henry died in 2008. But the interest in his data continued as researchers immediately began a custody battle over the physical tissue of his brain. Dr. Suzanne Corkin, who spent decades studying Henry, took control of the organ. To do so, she bypassed his first cousin and obtained consent from distant relative who claimed he had cared for Henry. Later, Corkin admitted to destroying 50 years of her personal interview notes with Henry. She prioritized the physical data points found in the brain over the records of his subjective human experiment. Henry Molaison provided the specific evidence for memory consolidation, the physical mechanism of learning. but that knowledge was extracted from a man whose own past and future were lost to a procedure that most of his contemporaries consider a reckless gamble. If you like similar content, please like and subscribe.